welcome back to the podcast, guys. So I am interviewing a teacher friend of mine today, and we worked together. Oh my gosh, it has been so many years ago, but
A
it was
while ago.
actually, yes, it was so many years ago. It was actually Alexis's first year teaching. She was doing the same alternative certification program that I did, and it was her internship year as a teacher. And that's when I met her, and we were in a very unique situation. I will just say that. But then she went on to teach and has been teaching for several years. I'm going to have her kind of tell you a little bit about her story in a moment. But she is now a third grade teacher in Texas. And I could not be more excited to welcome her to the podcast. And she's going to talk to us a little bit today about some things that she's been doing in her classroom to help with her small group instruction and her math and literacy centers. And I can't wait to get to talk to you. So welcome, Alexis. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to spend some time chit-chatting with you.
Absolutely. Listen, we don't get to talk that as often as we used to.
Not
Kids and business and everything else, teaching, everything else gets in the way. And we were just talking before the podcast. Her daughter came on and said hi. And I told her, I said, you're not supposed to be standing up. You're supposed to still be like in diapers and in a carrier, because that's what I remember, because she's grown so fast. So you must be super, super proud of her.
I'm very proud of her. I was watching a video on Facebook that popped up this morning when she was about 2 with her little golf club. And I just went, oh, my heart.
Oh my gosh. And I want you to tell us a little bit about your story. And it kind of starts with golf, because you've kind of always been an entrepreneur as well, but teaching was not what your first career, was it?
No, I took about the most roundabout way of becoming a teacher you could. When I was in elementary school and middle school, that was what I wanted to do, was teach. I mean, I spent hours playing school in my room. That's probably why I got so good at math facts, probably why I got so good at reading, because I would read chapter books out loud as if my students were listening. And I would, do the facts, and I'd keep all my graded papers and I'd grade them and regrade them. And, all the little things that kids do. And so then, fast forward into middle school and high school, and I decided I wanted to go to vet school. So teaching kind of went by the wayside, and got to work for a vet clinic, and decided, gosh, putting in that many years and investing that much money and not being 100% sure that that's what I want to do the rest of my life, I thought maybe that's not my route. So when I got to college, I actually went the equine industry and business route. So my degrees are actually not education. My bachelor's degree is in equine industry and ag business, and my master's degree is actually in animal science. So spent 3.5 years doing that. And, I loved the industry I was in, but I didn't necessarily love sitting behind a computer and formulating feed. I didn't necessarily love all the travel that went along with it, because it's not like I was getting to choose where I was traveling and who I was traveling with. I was traveling with salesmen and whatnot. And about that time, my husband and I had been married for about 3 years, along about this time, and ended up, Scout was on the way, our daughter. And I just sat down with my boss one day. We happened to be at an equine science symposium in Keystone, Colorado. And we were just sitting there chatting. And I said, I'm just not sure. I think you and I both know this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Okay, now wait a minute. Let's back up a little bit. You were going from veterinary and equine sciences and doing something similar to pharmaceutical sales, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. Feed sales mostly.
Doing travel, and you're doing feed sales and stuff, but definitely making a very decent income doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you flipped and said, I think I'm going to go be a teacher.
Yeah. That's how I knew that's what I really wanted to do.
You knew we weren't paid well, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yes. All right. Continue.
And I knew I wasn't going to have a company vehicle with a company credit card and a gas card. And I wasn't going to get to take yearly trips to Cancun and go on cruises like I'd been doing with, all of our feed dealers. But I was willing to give all that up, because I wanted to wake up each morning going, I get to do what I love to do, instead of waking up each morning going, is it Friday yet? because that's kind of the point I got to.
Now
And
we
I know
still do that as teachers. Is it
this
Friday?
time of year, come
Sometimes
April
a
and
year, yeah.
May, heck yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
but to be perfectly honest, I mean, we joke about that, but I truly love what I do.
Yeah,
And I get to change lives, and I get to, teach an age group that pretty much for the most part still thinks we're pretty wonderful every day.
exactly.
And so, I loved it. And yeah, and my husband was on board. I mean, and everything. So anyway, fast forward, got done with all the classwork online, and it was time to find an internship, which is very difficult because we are in a mostly Title I area, and they have to hire what they call highly qualified
Yes.
teachers, which meant you need to be certified.
Yes.
And I talked to, everything from the ISDs that were local to everything else. And I pretty much got told, unless you graduated from college A, B, C, or D, we're not going to visit with you,
Right.
unless you had a teaching degree. And I'm like, well, okay. So in the meantime, my husband and I had opened a business in Lubbock. It was a golf simulation business, similar to like a Top Golf, just in a much smaller scale.
Right.
And so there's where the golf comes into it.
Yeah, I was like, that's where the golf comes in.
Yes. And I happened to be sitting there one day on the computer. And obviously, I was still looking for a teaching job because I invested all this time and some money, and this is what I wanted to do. And came across a listing in the Lubbock Avalanche Journal online for this position. It was an apprenticeship at that same school that you were at. It was a public charter school. So, I thought, well, I'm going to try this. So I went to the interview, and I can remember that day sitting in this room. I think it was the computer lab we were sitting in. And I remember looking around, and of course, I have no teaching experience, no classroom teaching experience. Remember, I didn't student teach. And looking around going, there are like 30 people in this room. There is no way that I'm going to outperform all these people in this interview. So I went in with the interview, and basically I said, look, I am a blank slate. Mold me how you want me. I have no preconceived notions about what I want my classroom to look like or anything. And honestly, in hindsight, that's probably what got me the opportunity.
In that situation, yes.
In that situation.
And that would be a whole nother podcast to talk about
that approach would not work in pretty much 99% of situations.
Right.
But in that one, I guess it did. And so anyway, I got to start that apprenticeship, and it I will say it was absolutely a wonderful learning experience. It was. I had a couple of great mentors, one of them actually being you, believe it or not.
Oh, thank you.
You had been there, you had been teaching, similar to the grade level I was teaching. My first year was in first grade. And so I did have some great example of what a good running classroom should look like. Just those intangible things that I don't care what program you go through. They're not going to teach you these things in any college program or online program or alt-cert program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is something that we hear. Yeah, that is something we hear so often. And I know a lot of times alternative certification teachers, now I've been teaching for almost 25 years now. How many years have you been teaching? You've been teaching now.
This is year 11.
Year 11. And I know a lot of times we as alternative certification teachers get a bad rap on some level.
Yes,
because especially in Texas, there was a big push in Texas for you just need a degree. We don't care what it's in. Come get your certification to teach. And it did produce some not so great teachers.
Absolutely.
But I think for a lot of us, it though gave us the opportunity to go into a profession we hadn't ever thought about being a part of, because I didn't go to school for that either. So
there have been some amazing teachers come through, and there have been some not so amazing teachers come through. And a lot of that also has to do with that first year is so critical in getting a mentor or handful of mentors. Even when I left that original school and went into the public school system, I had some mentor teachers who taught the grade levels above me that, they became lifelong friends. And if it hadn't been for them, I may not have become the teacher that I feel like I am today. So, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I tell people all the time, and I know you've heard me say it so many times. The best professional development is often the teacher next door,
Yes.
because we can take classes, we can go take college classes. Nothing prepares you for what it's actually like in the trenches, and
No.
learning from other teachers who have gone before you and
Yes.
been there and done it and have
Yes.
figured it out is what you should be doing.
Yes.
So I
I've
love
always
that.
said I want to create a class and teach at a college titled "The Thousands of Things They Never Taught You and What Really Happens in Class." I mean, just like, all the stuff that they could never actually create, all of those real life situations, and how you handle them, and just things like that, you just sometimes you just learn as you go, and you learn by doing, and sometimes you go, well, that didn't work.
I think it's just so hard sometimes to go into a profession that doesn't prepare you in your classes, but finding those professional developments that you can take, and those professional learning communities that you can be a part of, to where you can take your craft to the next level, is very, very important. And it doesn't matter what stage you're at, whether you're in year one or whether you're in year nine, it doesn't matter, or year 20, finding those professional development and
Yeah,
learning
definitely.
communities is important.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're teaching third grade now.
Yes, I've actually taught third grade for the last 10 years. I spent 1 year teaching first grade. I am departmentalized. Our third grade is departmentalized. So I only teach math. I teach 3 rotations of math each day. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
So you're teaching third grade math,
Mhm.
and I'm assuming you're doing small group instruction. You thought, well, I'm in third grade. And one of the big misconceptions I've been talking about even this week is that math and literacy centers, and whether it's the system or small group instruction and you having some sort of station system they rotate through, or the actual activities, is that's for kinder first grade. That's for only the little ones do that. But and you're
Yeah.
going into third grade, and you kind of thought that too.
Oh, absolutely. I had seen the to an extent that you had set up within your classroom, and you were teaching kinder at the time. And, knowing, first of all, the first year, so I was a little bit of deer in the headlights with a lot of things anyway. I was just like, just tell me what to teach, I will teach it. But as far as
However
like,
you want me to teach it.
yeah, but as far as like going out on my own and finding stuff and creating centers, I was like, no, you know, and so seeing what you had as far as centers, a lot of the centers that you see, even today, like if you just get on, Teacher Pay Teacher, Pinterest, whatever, you see things for literacy like beginning sounds, ending sounds, rhyming. Well, I'm sorry, but that don't work in third grade, right? So that was my thought. And math, you see all these centers where they've got, like, maybe they've got the little base 10 blocks and they're counting them, and maybe they've got, what comes before and what comes after, or maybe it's like 100 chart activities. And so seeing those things, and there just wasn't a lot out there for the upper level grades. And I thought, well, I can't put that stuff in centers because we're way past that. Up until now, I'm going to be 100% honest here, up until about a year ago, I was of the opinion that everything I did in my classroom had to be at Star Rigger, because that, as a third grade teacher, that's been the bulk of my career, right? My first year of teaching was the first year that STAR was created. So I am a STAR, test teacher. And
And for my listeners, I don't mean to cut you off, Alexis, but for my listeners who are not Texas teachers,
oh, sorry.
STAR is our
Forgot about
state testing. That is
Yes.
our state test, and it begins in third grade. So kudos to you, because I taught third grade, and I was like, yep, this is the deer in the headlights year. I don't want to teach this year.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but
it
for
is
those who might not know, STAR is our state testing.
Yeah,
So go
yeah.
ahead.
And it is because anybody who's taught for any amount of time and has taught anywhere between the second, third, and fourth grade level, when they come to us in third grade in August or September, or whenever you start school where you're at, they're babies. They're babies. And you see this huge change with maturity and with everything. I mean, even physical, like, you take their picture the first day of school, and even by Christmas, you go, oh my goodness, y'all have grown up so much. I always thought well, everything I do needs to be at star rigor after like December, because otherwise I'm wasting time. I'm spinning my wheels. I don't want to give them, easy, baby stuff that they're like, oh yeah, we did that months ago. I'm good. My centers, I pretty much had my group that I was doing that lesson with that was scripted in C-scope, and everybody else was doing some kind of like fact practice, maybe like a game. And I'll be the first to admit they probably weren't 100% on task all the time, because again, I was just trying to worry about teaching my lesson. And kind of like the seat work thing where you and I were my first year, what the other students were doing was literally being treated as busy work. And I knew that's not what my center should look like, but I couldn't grasp in my mind and find a system where I could make it all work for me.
So
I
if you had to guess,
how many systems did I run to?
how many hours? Yeah, how many hours did you spend on Pinterest looking for?
Oh, the rabbit hole that Pinterest used to get me into. Oh my gosh. And of course, that's when Pinterest first was created too. So it was like all brand new. And it was like,
okay, now you're telling how old we are. Oh,
I know, right?
Go ahead.
So I would sit there for hours on the weekends, and you'd click on something, you think, oh, that looks like a cool thing to do. Well, it takes you to somebody's blog. So then you start looking through their blog and going through all these ideas on their blog. And then pretty soon you've gone down this rabbit hole that you can't even remember what you originally were searching for, but you found all this other stuff that pretty soon you're like, well, if I could have 6 weeks of just sitting at home and trying to figure out how to make all this work, I could make it happen. But I don't have the time in my life to look like a Pinterest classroom.
Did you find center systems on Pinterest that you tried?
Oh, I tried a lot of things from Pinterest. I tried probably 4 or 5 different variations of centers and how to rotate and what should be done in the centers as far as activities. And every single year, I would be great until late January or early February. And then you get busy because, let's be honest, this is star testing season. And again, it was that, well, this stuff's not rigorous enough. I've got to be doing star type stuff. And so I would abandon it. And so the next year I would find something. Okay, this year, this is going to work. This is going to work. And of course, I would put tons of time into planning and prepping and, having to reprint stuff all the time and, just ridiculous amounts of time. And again, by January or February, we're done with that. So
by the time you find this system, and by the time you get it set, so you spend all this time getting it set up, and then by the time you actually get it working, you're probably into October.
Yes.
And then so you might get November and a couple weeks in December, and you come back and it's not working.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and either because it was too complicated to keep up with, or
that was a lot of it.
It was just too complicated to keep up with.
The rotations themselves maybe weren't complicated, but I was complicating it. I was trying to put so much into a center so that I was making it rigorous enough that they couldn't do it without me spending forever explaining it and then re-explaining it the next day. And then they'd still be back at my table bugging me. What do I do? And how do I do this? And I don't understand. And stuff. It was just a repetitive, every year it was the same cycle. And finally I was like, there has got to be a better plan out here. And so yeah.
I'm curious, because I heard you say something that I see all the time when I go in and I observe teachers, and their students are constantly interrupting them. Their students don't know how to do the activity because they've picked something and it looks great on paper, and it probably is a very good activity. It's just not something your kids can necessarily do independently.
Right.
Plus, when you've got math and literacy center, or when you've got activities that you really need them to just be able to go over there and do without you having to do a lot of explanation. Talk about that and kind of what that process was like of trying to put activities and find activities that they could actually do without you having to spend a lot of time explaining.
It felt like every week I was finding new activities. Like every week I had to go search for stuff because, whatever I had used the year before, I might take pieces of that and try to use it again. But ultimately I had decided that didn't work. Don't use that again. It was too much to put in that center. And so it seemed like every time I went to do lesson plans, I was having to reinvent the wheel again. And we all know there's no need to reinvent the wheel. You find something that works and you just use that pattern. You got to find something that's not repetitive in what they're doing necessarily, but repetitive in nature as far as they know what's expected, they know how it works, they know what to do. And then as long
Absolutely.
as you make sure you've got something in there that's a spiral. Oh, here's the other mistake I used to make. I would stick stuff in centers that had no business being in centers because they hadn't had enough chance to practice with it. It was not a spiraled skill.
Oh,
I did that to myself more times than I care to admit.
my teacher heart is so happy because
Yeah.
I tell you, this happens so often. And it is one of the very first things that I teach is your centers have got to be things that are that your kids have already learned.
Yeah.
They've had some time to practice with. If you're putting things that are on the lesson plan that week in your centers
Or last week's. Yeah.
or
No.
last week's, yeah.
I was shooting myself in the foot every time because I would do something one week and then the next week I would put it in a center. They're not ready for that. They're not
Absolutely.
independent on that skill yet. I hate to admit that it took me almost 10 years of teaching to figure that out because that should have been common sense. But as teachers, sometimes we forget to take a step back and use our common sense. We're so worried about getting it all in and making sure that we're, exposing them to all this stuff. And, oh my gosh, I got to have this many grades for the 6 weeks or the 9 weeks or whatever. And that was another battle that I had to deal with, was just, okay, great, I've got all these centers, but I need grades, And so I've had to figure out ways to still get my required grades, but yet I'm not grading everything that I'm putting in the centers.
Absolutely. I heard you say you were spending every week, you were spending time searching and searching and searching. And I'm guessing this was coming into play with what I know for me, it was those Sunday night blues where
Oh,
you basically have to tell your family after church, after lunch, I'm sorry, I y'all can't talk to me. I'm going to be busy for the next 8
yeah,
hours because I'm going to end up on this rabbit hole of just trying to find
yeah,
activities to put in. So were you
exactly.
spending just hours upon hours searching?
Oh yeah. Or I'd go up to the school and spend an entire Sunday afternoon up in my classroom, just trying to put stuff together. And that goes into, I've been very proud of myself. It's only taken me 11 years to do this, but, uh, I finally have a method to the madness, and I am lesson planned, set up, and done when I leave my classroom on Friday afternoon. This year, I have not had to come home and do lesson plans on the weekends. I have not had stacks of papers to grade that ultimately, sometimes, let's be honest, y'all, sometimes they go in file 13 because you're like, you know what? I have umpteen grades. I'm not going to sit here and grade this. I'm sick of grading. Chunk it, you know?
Okay.
And so, I, it's been life changing, honestly. Finally finding something that works for me. It is April 2nd, right? Is it April 2nd? Yeah,
It
it's
is
April
April
2nd.
2nd. It is April
Uh,
2nd.
and I've made it all year, and we're still rolling with our centers and everything. So yeah, I used to spend ridiculous amounts of time trying to lesson plan and all that, when if I'd have had a system that actually worked well and center activities that were working the way they were designed to work, and I was implementing them the way they were designed to work, I could have had a whole lot of extra time to sit there on the couch and watch a football game, or, just chill, or whatever it might be. So,
Well, and tell me, so not only in your own planning and prepping, because that's a very big piece of it too, is prepping, making sure that you have activities that follow, and I teach this, that follow those simple patterns, because it even helps with prepping because you already know it's going to be simple, easy, and you
yeah.
already know exactly what's going to have to happen, and you're not having to go, oh, this is what I need, this is what I need. But talk about, in your classroom, how much time you got back, if you got any time back in your classroom, because it was your kids finally knew what to do and things were moving like clockwork. I mean, is that something that you experienced? Had a lot more time to
Oh,
teach?
yes. And I know you're going to laugh because you're going to say, I told you, Atwood, it would work. I remember having a conversation with you, and I said, I don't feel comfortable only having little 10-minute rotations at my teacher table because I can't get enough done. And you said, oh, but you can. And I want you to know that I pretty much do 10, 12 at the most minute rotations instead. And I see every student every day. So I see all of my third graders every day at my teacher table, as opposed to one of the center setups that I tried at one point within the last 2 years. I only saw 2 groups a day. So I'd see maybe my lows and my mids one day, and then the next day I'd see my next set of mids and my high, or however I had it set up, And then on Friday there weren't centers. So, well, there were, but not teacher table. It was more, other stuff. But
Right.
anyway, so I was only seeing my kids basically twice a week at my teacher table. And it was taking a long time to get things accomplished because you've got to take 2 days to do what it was you wanted to do. If you're working on a certain standard and you're working on these things at different leveled groups, obviously, and pushing some groups further and working more on the basic stuff with some, but you still got to take 2 days to do it if you're only seeing half of your kids every day. So this year, with the way I'm doing it now, I'm getting to see every kid every day. And in about October, I was standing there talking to one of my team teachers who teaches science and social studies. And I said, I cannot figure out why. And of course, in hindsight, I'm like, well, duh. Anyway, I said, I cannot figure out why, but I'm like 2 weeks ahead of where I was last year at this time.
Love
Like seriously, I'm like 2 weeks ahead. I'm already doing stuff now that I was doing like right before Christmas or right around Thanksgiving. And she's like, I don't know, and I first attributed it to last year was a very difficult year with some of the students that we had.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of days that it was just a 3-ring circus, literally. And I felt like I just wasn't able to get some of my teaching done as well as or as in depth as I wanted to. So I was just attributing it to that. Well, then I got to thinking about it. I was like, well, you're not taking 2 days with every single thing you do at your teacher table. You're able to actually get things accomplished faster. And I was like, funny how that works.
Funny how that works.
Yeah. So obviously
so
I got a lot of time back in my classroom. So, and plus with just the prepping and the planning, prep work, if I, for some odd reason, and I've done it a couple of times, for some odd reason, if I don't have my center boxes set up and ready to go for the next week before I leave Friday, literally I can walk in Monday morning. I can spend 5 minutes pulling, here's the center for this, here's the center activity for this. And I keep the recording sheets and the answer documents, I keep them in a file alphabetized in my file cabinet. So I can go, okay, I'm doing this activity in this center. Okay, here's the recording sheet. I'm gonna go run those copies real quick, put it in the folder in the box. Here's my stuff. Done. 5 minutes.
5 minutes, done. I love it. I love it.
And what I love even more is, okay, so this year's been a little crazy with the virtual thing, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of virtual students. We started out with about 4. Now keep in mind, we only had 36 or 37 total third graders. So, but regardless, we didn't have a lot of them, but we still had to go live and record our lessons. And we use Google Classroom at our district. So, I was trying to do teacher table with my iPad there while I had my kids in front of me, along with my kids at home, and trying to do all that. But I could still have my kids at home be doing the same centers that we were doing at school, because I could upload them onto Google Classroom and they were right there. And then here's another aha moment I had, because again, with the whole crazy year we've had, having
2020.
to try to keep them 6 feet apart in the classroom, and kids are like little magnets, they want to congregate together.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought, okay, now I really don't want to have to reprint all my center stuff, because the initial, I printed everything, laminated, cut, and yeah, the initial took some time, but now I don't have to do that again. So
Yeah.
it's time saving in the end. But I was like, okay, I really don't want to have to print multiple copies of every center so that they can all, sit that far away from each other and work. But I was like, I can upload the center into their Google Classroom. They can go get their iPad. They can go sit down and they can work on it and still be sitting at that center. And they don't have to touch any of the physical task cards. And it's worked so well. And again, I don't know why it took me till like January to think of that one.
Well, and they're the same activities. They follow the same simple patterns that they're used to. It's not recreating the wheel or throwing an activity at them that they're like, okay, how do I do this? What am I supposed to match? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to? They're not having to relearn how to do something. And so it saves time because they can just go sit down and get busy.
Yeah, exactly. And, I had talked a little bit ago about how I thought everything had to be star rigor. Well, I was kind of wrong. And so, I love that the centers that I'm using this year are just spiraling those skills that are so important to be able to use the rigor that we need when it comes time for it. But things like double-digit multiplication facts, division facts, modeling the different representations, like there's one with arrays where you're doing division, just addition or subtraction. And the cool thing is that they're all self-checking, because they've got the task card that has the little problem, but it's also got the little cards that you can match. So literally it's self-checking, because if they can't find the answer, and you've always got those kids, Miss Atwood, this answer is not here. I said, well, honey, I promise you
it's there.
I promise you, if you can't find the answer that you got, you might want to go back and check your work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nice in that respect, because they know that they can find their little matches. And if they don't find the match, they know that something's not quite right. And so that, again, keeps them from being at my table all the time saying, I can't find the answer. I don't know how to do this. I just, it's been great. So I can have my little 10-minute rotations at my teacher table. And the other cool thing, and this was not always the case either, when you get so many things that they have to, we've all been there. You're going to have to cut all these apart. You're going to have to sort them, and you're going to have to glue them and blah, blah, blah. So right there, you've got little loose pieces of paper that end up on the floor, because most third graders can't just cut a piece of paper. They got to cut it into like a million little pieces, so that they've got all those million little pieces of trash.
Paper confetti everywhere.
Yes. And so the concept of you've got like a minute to clean up so we can rotate would turn into this big production, because it's like, guys, come on, you got to pick up all that trash. Oh, there's scissors over there. Oh, there's glue over there. Oh, there's this, there's that. And so the other thing I really love, and especially with the digital version of it, there's very little cleanup. I mean, you pick up your pieces, you put them back in the bag, you put them in the box, and they know they better leave that box looking like it did when they got there. Because my famous phrase is, I'm not your maid.
I'm not your maid. I'm not your mommy.
I'm not cleaning up after you. You are plenty old to clean up after yourself. So anyway, that's the other thing I love. I've got my little doorbell at my teacher table, and I ring my doorbell, and you've got 1 minute to clean up so we can rotate. They get it cleaned up, and half of them are ready to rotate within like 15 seconds. So it's been really great. They know exactly what's required. But I really love the spiralness, if that's a word. Did I just make up
spiralness? You just made up a word, did you? I don't know.
I just made up a word. I should
say it is.
But anyway, I love the amount of spiraling that happens within those centers. For instance, our kids learned double-digit multiplication several weeks ago, but this last week, one of their centers was double digit multiplication. And, with our standards, we're teaching them, partial products, we're teaching them an area model, we're teaching standard algorithm like we all learned it, but we've got all these other ways for these kiddos who just can't quite grasp the process behind the standard algorithm. And what's cool though, is now they've had enough spiral practice that, man, they're knocking out that double digit multiplication, and they're to the point that they are wanting to use the standard algorithm.
Yeah.
And so they practiced it enough that they're comfortable with it now. Whereas before, I might be trying to throw them maybe one or two rigorous problems a day where they're, first of all, they're struggling through the rigor of it. If they're a lower performing student who's really maybe not quite there, and they're getting downtrodden for that,
Yeah.
and they're not getting enough practice with just the basic skill that they're needing to do, and they're not getting it completed. That was the other thing I used to deal with all the time, was half my kids didn't complete their centers from last week, so now we've got to spend this week trying to finish that, so then I got to change my lesson plans. And there's no reason that they can't get their centers finished now. I mean, there's no reason. There's 12 little things that they're going to match in general. Almost every center has roughly 12 things on it for the ones I'm using. And even my kids who may struggle with focus, or who may struggle with the process, or who may struggle with some of those skills, they're able to feel like they've accomplished something because they're independent. They can do it on their own. And yeah, I still go through and I check to make sure that they're, getting it. And if I see someone that they missed half of them, I'm like, okay, we're going to pull them aside. We're going to bring them to my teacher table. We're going to go over it. But in general, they're successful.
So what I'm hearing you, I'm just hearing you say all of these really amazing little, gold nuggets of things, is that you got back time outside of the classroom. You got more teaching time inside of the classroom. You were seeing that your students were actually grasping the concepts better because you were implementing spiral review instead of, trying to put things in your centers that were like what you were teaching that week, because you were so stressed out about making sure the star rigor was there. And you also now meet with all of your students every single day, not just one or two groups.
Yeah.
But do you think also that because you're able to teach and you're able to meet with all of your students every single day, that means that you are actually able to do more of that rigorous instruction inside your small groups, so
Mhm.
you're not having to stress out about putting it into your centers as well? Talk to me for a minute about differentiation. How easy is it to differentiate now for your students who maybe need a little extra practice on something, or they need to be pushed because they've already mastered it, so now they need some extra, pushing them a little further?
Well, one cool thing is I now have my hands on centers that will fit a multitude of abilities, a multitude of, grade levels, basically. So if I've got, and I do have a couple of kiddos who are literally working on a kindergarten level. And so at the beginning of the year, I was working with our special ed teacher, and I said, okay, I realize this student's going to be with you a fair amount for resource, but when this student's in my room, I can print out some of these kindergarten level centers, and that student can work on those and still be independent, because this student, let's be honest, has no business doing third grade level work. I mean, we're still working on one more, one less, and from day to day, we might be able to do it and we might not.
Right.
And so, that was something that nobody had ever really, been able to do before, because not many teachers are going to take a whole bunch of time, first of all, to go find and pay for and print and do all this stuff for one or two students that, are nowhere near the grade level they're teaching. And I, like, that fast, I was able to find what I wanted, print some things out, and then, I passed them on to the special education teacher, and I said, if you have other kiddos that you can use these for, when they're with you, feel free. I don't mind you using them. So if I have a kiddo that's on a lower level, I can find something that they need to work on. Maybe I've got someone who just really needs to work on basic addition facts as opposed to addition with regrouping, or whatever the case may be. And same thing goes for my students who need pushed a little bit. I can go ahead and look into some of the centers that might be in later parts of the year, but are still the same type of skill, maybe just a little bit more elevated in nature, and I can have them work on those. So,
and it's super simple to do when you have a place to go and you're not spending all your time on the weekends. Because let's face it, the further, I usually didn't run into needing to differentiate a whole lot. Obviously it was usually needing to differentiate down in the beginning of the
right.
year, but as you go through the year and you're really needing to differentiate down and up, let's face it, we get tired and we don't have a lot of time, and we need that place where we can look, all I know is I just got to go log in. I just got to go find it. And that's really what we need, because we don't have time to spend. And that's a lot of the biggest issue I see with regard to differentiation, is just teachers not having time to actually do the work that's needed to do the differentiation.
Yeah.
So I know everybody, okay, so I know if you're listening, if you're watching this video, because I am recording the video of us chatting as well. If you're watching the video, or you're listening to the podcast, I know you're probably thinking, okay, what is this amazing thing that you're talking about? Because this sounds like absolute small group instruction heaven. And I will say that Alexis teaches third grade math, but the same things that she's doing in math, I know you've taught reading before. Would you be doing this in reading as well?
Oh, 100%.
100%.
And science and social studies, our science and social studies teacher would be using them.
Oh, that's awesome. So I also have another interview that if I don't know if you'll have seen that one or you'll watch it after this one, with a kindergarten teacher who she actually always taught fifth grade. I think it was
that was a change, wasn't it?
And she moved to kindergarten this year. And it was her first year in kindergarten. She was like, surely kindergarten, how bad could it be? And so I know that it doesn't matter whether you're teaching kindergarten all the way up through fifth grade. And even she has said, listen, if I go back to fifth grade, I'm so doing this because this was so nice. But so the system that you use is my Learning Centers Made Easy program. You went through the course. Now, Alexis was one of our founding members, I will say that. And you went through the course. And then and the course itself I don't know why I said just, but the course itself taught you the system and gave you all of the components to make the system work. And so talk about how that course, because I know you talked about it, because you said, I remember telling you there's no way I can meet with every single group, but talk about how that course really helped change your mindset and gave you everything you needed to really make this happen.
Well, it made it so simple. I was
My
trying.
motto.
I wasn't following the KISS method whatsoever for the 9 years prior. It just made it so simple to use and made it just seem like common sense. Like, oh my gosh, this does work and this will work. And, I was a little leery of trying it halfway through the year because, again, when I went through the course, it was right after Christmas break.
Yep.
So we were starting into spring semester. I had already taught my kids my other not so helpful center rotation. And so I was like, gosh, I don't know if I can, like, mid-year, like, jump into it. And so I just thought, well, what the heck, we're going to try it. Because last year at this time, or in January, I needed simplicity. It was a crazy year. Even this was way before COVID-19 was a thing. It was just truly a crazy year. We had struggles every day with just behavior management. And I mean, it was a 3-ring circus. So I was like, anything to make my life easier. So I tried it and I thought, I don't have anything to lose. We're just going to try it. And it almost immediately just kind of flawlessly worked because it flows so well. It makes sense. The kids, they loved it. They thought, this sounds really silly, but they even thought like the center boxes, they were just so cool. It wasn't like, here's your paper, here's your stuff that you need. I mean, it was, every center had a spot within the room, and they loved it, and it worked so well. Of course, I didn't get to finish out the year with it. Because life, got a little crazy, but this fall, and even, I did talk to you a few times and ask, so like, how am I going to make this work with what we're having to deal with this year? How's this whole thing going to work?
And that wasn't, and just to clarify, you said you reached out and we talked and we chatted. That wasn't just special treatment you were getting.
No,
that was part of the program. There was
part
the
of the
coaching that
program.
went along with it. Yeah. And the
Absolutely.
community.
Yeah, that was part of the program. And so, yeah, I mean, I've implemented it all year, and we're still going strong, and it's April 2nd and I haven't quit yet. And I love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, you went through the course, and would you say that the course is, that the system, because the system is pretty simple, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, if do the system the exact way that I tell you to do it, but then you can adapt it. It's very easily to adapt to your own style without having to really reinvent anything.
Yeah, no, it's the way you designed it. I just had, a couple little things, again, that just because of the nature of this year, I tweaked just a little bit, but it's working fabulously. And next year I'm planning on, fully implementing 100%, because, hopefully we won't have some of those restrictions by next fall. But yeah, it's so simple, and anybody can implement it. There is not a rocket science behind it. But it truly took somebody that tried to keep it simple, instead of getting in that mindset of it's got to be so rigorous, and it's got to be, all these different things. And that's why I'm so glad I did go through the course, because, each week you broke down a component of the center system, and really, helped us see, oh, this is easy to implement. And in fact, each week there were little pieces that we would implement, whether it was just a little bit of planning with, obviously you're not going to necessarily use all of your students as they are, but just using some of the students you have in your class. You've always got in your mind, like, okay, here's this pairing, or here's this grouping, and here's how I could do this. And so it just really helped each week bring it together as far as how we can implement this. And so by the time the course was completed, there were a lot of things that were already done.
Yeah. Well, and I'm, of course, you're hearing this for the first time, because I haven't even announced it to the group yet, but we are actually going to be doing a virtual boot camp right before school starts next year, where we're going to go through, and you are going to get a 4-week boot camp, and we're basically going to go back through the course again. And
I would love that.
Visit everything. So
I'm
excited about the virtual event. I said 4-week. I didn't mean 4-week. I meant 4-day. I don't know why I said 4 weeks.
I'm there.
But we're going to do a 4-day virtual event, and you're going to get to go through, and I'm going to basically, we're going to go through everything. We're going to talk about things that are coming up. We'll have obviously new things that we may be in place for next school year. We don't know yet. So it's going to give everybody that opportunity to really get back in there, kind of reset, recharge, and go into it. So I'm super excited about that. Now, you went from the course to the membership, which when Alexis talks about all of the activities that she was using, and the differentiating, and having that one-stop shop to go to get that. So the membership was the next level, and you were like, oh my gosh, the course has changed everything. Yeah. I'm definitely going into the membership. So
it was a no-brainer.
Go ahead.
It was a no-brainer. It really was. Like, I didn't have to even think twice. So, I saw the value in the course to start with, but then I saw the value in the membership, because there are so many added benefits as far as materials and activities and access to you even. with office hours that we can hop on and ask questions, or like brainstorm, or get clarification on things, or even just, okay, so I tried this and here's what's kind of, and just talking through it with you. And so that was invaluable as well. So yeah, the membership was a no-brainer.
I love that. I'm so excited about the next year that's coming up.
Me too.
I'm just, we've got so many other great things that are coming for you guys. And for those of you who are watching or listening, you can check somewhere around here in a description or somewhere. There will be a link for you to go get a little bit of information and join the waiting list, because at the time of this recording, it is not open for enrollment yet. It's something we only open in enrollment at the end of the school year, so that we can go through that training in the summer. And so you can go get on the wait list, and so that you can get in the next time, and you can come join Alexis. And Alexis does a lot of, she answers questions and stuff in our group as well. So I love that.
Yes.
But you guys have just absolutely filled my heart and my life this past year, and it's been amazing. So I hope I've been able to give just a fraction of that back to you guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me on this.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was fun.
And yeah, she's my friend, but she was not paid for this. And I literally last night was like, hey, can I jump on? And because you happened to jump on a live last night, and
Yeah, I did. I was just on
like,
Facebook messing around.
yeah,
Yeah.
you were saying
Yeah.
some things in our live, and I was like, oh, I'm going to use that quote. Oh, I'm going to use that quote. And then I was like, hey, will you jump on and can I do an interview with you? And so I had no idea what she was going to say, to be honest with you. But thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
If you're looking for more tips, strategies, and simple systems that actually work to take back into your classroom to make your teacher life easier, check out the videos on your screen. Thanks for watching, and keep being an educational rock star.